What if the single most exhausting thing you do every single day is not your work, not your responsibilities, not your struggles, but the endless draining, soul-depleting act of explaining yourself to people who have already decided who you are and have absolutely no intention of changing their minds? What if every conversation where you justified your choices, defended your dreams, apologized for your ambitions, or shrunk yourself down to make someone else comfortable, what if every single one of those moments was quietly, systematically stealing the life you were actually meant to be living? What if the people whose approval you have been chasing so desperately are not the judges of your story, but simply characters in it? And what if the moment you stop performing your life for the wrong audience is the exact moment your real life finally begins? I need you to stay with me today because what I am about to share is not comfortable, it is not easy, and it will absolutely challenge everything you've been taught about being likable, being accepted, and being good. But it might be the most important thing you hear this year, because you were not put on this earth to spend your one precious life justifying your existence to people who were never meant to witness your greatness. What if the life you are living right now, this exact version of your life, has been quietly, invisibly designed by other people's opinions of you? Not by your dreams, not by your values, not by the quiet, persistent voice inside you that has been trying to get your attention for years, but by the accumulated weight of everyone else's expectations, judgments, and approval, absorbed so gradually, so completely, that you have forgotten where their voice ends and yours begins. This is the conversation I want to have with you today. Not a comfortable conversation, not a conversation that leaves you feeling validated and unchanged. A conversation that might make you sit with something deeply uncomfortable because that discomfort is precisely where your freedom lives. Let's start with an honest question. How much of your energy, your actual finite, irreplaceable daily energy, is spent justifying your life to people who were never meant to understand it? Think about that for a moment. Not abstractly, concretely. How many times this week did you explain a decision you made to someone who didn't ask with genuine curiosity, but with judgment barely disguised as concern? How many times did you soften your truth to avoid someone's discomfort? How many times did you second guess a choice that felt completely right internally, simply because you imagined how a specific person would react to it? How many times did you make yourself smaller so that someone else could feel more comfortable in your presence? We do this constantly. We do it automatically. We do it so habitually that we have stopped recognizing it as a choice. But it is a choice, and every time we make it, we pay with something we cannot earn back. Our authenticity, our energy, our sense of self, our time. Here is the first hard truth of today's conversation. The wrong people will never understand your vision, not because your vision is flawed, not because you're explaining it poorly, not because you need to find better words or a more compelling argument, but because they are the wrong people. Vision is not universally distributed. The clarity you feel about your own life path, the thing that lights you up at 2 a.m, the dream that persists despite every setback, the direction that pulls you forward even when it makes no logical sense, that was given specifically to you. It is calibrated to your unique combination of experiences, gifts, wounds, and longings. You cannot transfer it through explanation. You cannot make someone feel in 5 minutes of conversation what took you years of living to understand. And here's what happens when you keep trying. You exhaust yourself. You start to doubt the vision because the people around you can't see it. You mistake their inability to understand for evidence that you are wrong. You take their confusion and call it wisdom. You take their fear and call it concern. You take their smallness and call it reality checking. And slowly, quietly, you begin to edit yourself. Not all at once. That would be too obvious, too painful to ignore. But in small ways, a dream deferred here, an ambition quieted there, a choice made for someone else's comfort rather than your own truth. Until one day you look up and realize the life you are living is barely recognizable as your own. This is the cost of explaining your extraordinary to people who chose ordinary, not because ordinary is wrong, but because it is theirs, not yours. Now I want to talk about something even more fundamental, something most of us are doing so automatically that we have completely lost awareness of it. Seeking approval is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-destruction that human beings practice daily. It begins in childhood. This is important to understand because it means it is not your fault that you learned it, but it is absolutely your responsibility to unlearn it. As children, approval from caregivers was not just emotionally desirable, it was survival. We needed to be approved of, to be cared for. We learned to read rooms, adjust our behavior, edit our authenticity to maintain connection with the people who kept us safe. But we grew up, and many of us never updated the programming. So here we are, fully grown adults with fully developed capacity for independent thought and action, still running on the software of a child who needed approval to survive, still editing our words before we speak them, still making major life decisions based on how we imagine specific people will react, still performing versions of ourselves calibrated to whoever happens to be in the room. And the devastating, heartbreaking, absolutely shocking part, we are exhausting ourselves performing for an audience that is not even paying consistent attention. The people whose approval you are working so hard to earn, they are busy thinking about their own lives, their own insecurities, their own desperate need for approval from someone else. The performance you are giving is largely unwatched, and yet the price you are paying for it is everything. Every time you seek approval from someone who is not equipped to give you what you genuinely need, you practice a kind of self-abandonment. You communicate to yourself at the deepest cellular level that your own judgment is not trustworthy, that you need external validation to confirm what your internal wisdom already knows, that you are, in some fundamental way, not enough to be your own authority. And I need you to understand how dangerous that message is, because you have been sending it to yourself for a very long time. Now, let me talk about explanation, because this is where it gets nuanced and critically important. Not everyone deserves your explanation. Not every question deserves your answer. Not every relationship is entitled to your full transparency. We live in a culture that has confused oversharing with authenticity. We think that being open and honest means being endlessly available, endlessly explainable, endlessly accountable to whoever demands an accounting of our choices. But this is a profound misunderstanding of what genuine authenticity requires. Authenticity is not about sharing everything with everyone. Authenticity is about sharing the right things with the right people, the people who have earned access to your interior world through demonstrated trustworthiness, through consistent presence, through the willingness to be vulnerable in return. When you explain your deepest reasoning to someone who has already decided who you are, when you defend your choices to someone who is asking not out of genuine curiosity but out of judgment, comparison, or control, you are not building connection. You are handing someone a map to your vulnerabilities. You are giving them access to the very things they need to undermine you most effectively. And here is what I know about people who haven't earned that kind of access. They will use it. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but they will use it because that is what unexamined people do with information they haven't been equipped to handle responsibly. Your life is not a court case requiring constant defense. You are not perpetually on trial. You do not owe every skeptic, every critic, every person who questions your choices a detailed explanation of your private reasoning. Some things you do because they are right for you. That is sufficient justification. Now let me talk about boundaries, because the inability to stop justifying yourself is fundamentally a boundary issue. Boundaries have been so catastrophically misrepresented in our culture. They have been portrayed as walls, as coldness, as selfishness disguised in therapeutic language. People who set boundaries are labeled difficult, oversensitive, or emotionally unavailable. But here is the truth about what a boundary actually is. A boundary is a declaration of your own worth. It is a statement made through action rather than words that says, I know what I need to function as a healthy, whole, authentic human being, and I respect myself enough to protect it. It is not a punishment for the other person. It is not a rejection. It is not hostility. It is self-respect made visible. And the breathtaking thing about genuine boundaries, the thing that astonishes people every time they finally find the courage to set them, is that they don't push worthy people away. They clarify who the worthy people are. When you stop being endlessly available to justify yourself, some people will leave. And this will feel like loss, sometimes devastating, disorienting, grief-inducing loss. But what is actually happening is not loss, it is revelation. The relationships that required you to continuously shrink, explain, perform, and justify yourself in order to maintain them were not relationships at all. They were transactions. And you were always the one paying. The people who belong in your life will not require you to earn your place in it daily. They will not need you to defend your dreams before they believe in you. They will not make their love conditional on your compliance with their expectations. Boundaries reveal these people clearly, and the clarity, though sometimes painful initially, is one of the greatest gifts you will ever give yourself. Now, I want to address something that sits at the very heart of this conversation, something I think about deeply, something that has changed fundamentally how I understand both criticism and courage. Not all opinions deserve equal weight. This sounds obvious when stated plainly, but we live as though we believe the opposite. We give the harshest critics in our lives the most power over our decisions. We let the people who have risked nothing speak loudest about whether our risks are wise. We let those who have chosen comfort consistently be the primary arbiters of whether our courage is reasonable. The only feedback that deserves your genuine, considered attention, the only critique that carries actual weight, comes from people who are also in the arena, people who are also trying, people who are also risking failure, risking judgment, risking the exposure that comes from attempting something that matters, people who know what it costs to stand in the open and dare greatly. Criticism from someone who has never entered the arena is not wisdom. It is the sound of someone who chose the safety of the sidelines and who now watches those in the arena with a complicated mixture of admiration and resentment that comes out as mockery, dismissal, or unsolicited concern. That voice deserves your compassion, because choosing comfort over courage is its own kind of suffering, but it does not deserve your obedience. The person who hasn't risked anything does not get to determine whether your risk is worth taking. And finally, the most essential truth of everything we've discussed today, belonging to yourself first changes everything. Everything. There is a version of belonging that most of us have been chasing our entire lives, the belonging that comes from being accepted, approved of, understood, and included by the people around us. We have worked extraordinarily hard for this belonging. We have changed our appearance, our language, our opinions, our dreams, our behavior, all in service of being included, being liked, being chosen. And most of us have discovered at some profound and painful point that this kind of belonging is hollow, because it is conditional. It requires constant maintenance. It can be revoked without warning, and it comes at the price of the very authenticity that would make the belonging feel real. True belonging, the kind that is not dependent on performance, not contingent on compliance, not revocable based on someone else's mood or expectations, begins the moment you stop outsourcing your self-worth to external validation and start belonging completely, courageously, and unapologetically to yourself. This is not arrogance. This is not isolation. This is not deciding that other people don't matter. This is recognizing that you cannot genuinely connect with anyone else until you have genuinely connected with yourself. You cannot give belonging to others when you do not first belong to yourself. You cannot love fully from a place of perpetual self-abandonment. When you stop justifying your life to the wrong people, when you stop performing for an audience that was never meant to witness your greatness, something extraordinary and irreversible happens. You become yours. Your choices become yours. Your voice becomes yours. Your story becomes yours, not a collaborative document endlessly revised based on everyone else's feedback, but a singular, authentic, fully inhabited life. And from that place, from the place of genuine self-belonging, you stop needing the wrong people's approval. Not because you stop caring about human connection, but because you finally understand at the deepest possible level that the connection you were always craving cannot be found in their approval. It was inside you the whole time. We started today by asking, what if the most exhausting thing you do every day is justifying your life to people who were never meant to understand it? And we have walked together through the full, honest, sometimes uncomfortable answer to that question. The wrong people will never understand your vision, and that is not your failure, it is your freedom. Approval seeking is self-destruction wearing the costume of social harmony. Your explanations are precious currency. Spend them only where they will be honored. Boundaries are not walls of coldness. They are declarations of self-worth that reveal who truly belongs in your life. The only criticism that deserves your attention comes from people who are also in the arena, also bleeding, also brave. And belonging to yourself first, completely, courageously, without apology, is the foundation upon which every meaningful connection in your life must be built. You were not put on this earth to spend your one precious, irreplaceable life explaining yourself to people who have already decided who you are. You were put here to live fully, authentically, unapologetically. Stop justifying. Start being. That is where your real life has been waiting for you all along.
What if everything you thought was love was actually just a wound you learned to be comfortable in? What if the reason you keep ending up in the same toxic cycles, the same one-sided relationships, the same moments where someone crosses a line and you just let it go, isn't because you're not smart enough to see it, but because you were trained from the very beginning to call that pain normal? Trauma is not loud. It doesn't always look like a scar or a diagnosis. Sometimes it looks like a woman who laughs off being talked down to, a man who apologizes before the other person even finishes hurting him, a person who doesn't even know they deserve better because better was never part of what they were shown. Here's what the research tells us, and here's what I know from thousands of real, raw human stories. You did not choose this, but you can choose what happens next. You can unlearn it. Not overnight, not easily, but completely, courageously, and permanently.